He raced to confront her about stealing his money, but froze when 3 children hugged her legs calling, "Mommy!" as she boarded her private helicopter wearing a pilot uniform. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Sofia Abrantes rushed through the crowded Boston streets, her worn backpack heavy with textbooks and her mind racing with formulas from her morning business administration class. The autumn wind whipped through her dark hair as she checked her watch again. 15 minutes to change before her shift at Le Marseille, the upscale French restaurant where she worked evenings, her second job of the day. Another late night, another dollar, she muttered to herself in Portuguese, a habit she couldn't shake even after 3 years in America. At 23, Sofia had mastered the art of existing on 5 hours of sleep, fueled by determination and the cheap coffee she brewed in her shared apartment. The restaurant's back entrance led to a cramped staff room where Sofia quickly exchanged her jeans and sweater for the crisp white shirt and black slacks required of the waitstaff. She pinned her name tag slightly crooked, a detail the manager would surely comment on later. "Sofia, table 12 needs water," barked Jean-Pierre, the maitre d', the moment she emerged. "And please, fix your tag. We're not some diner on the highway." "Yes, sir," she replied, adjusting the pin while grabbing a water pitcher. Table 12 was in the VIP section, reserved for Boston's elite, the doctors, lawyers, and business executives who could afford $40 appetizers without blinking. Sofia approached the table with practiced grace, her posture perfect despite the fatigue settling into her shoulders. The lone diner, a man in his late 20s with perfectly tailored clothes and confident posture, was engrossed in his phone. "Good evening, sir," she said, pouring water into his glass. "Welcome to Le Marseille." The man looked up, and Sofia was momentarily caught in the intensity of his blue eyes. In that split second of distraction, her hand tilted the pitcher too far, sending water cascading over the edge of the glass and onto the man's expensive-looking sleeve. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she gasped, horrified, grabbing napkins and dabbing at his arm. Instead of the anger she expected, the man laughed, a warm, genuine sound that seemed to surprise even him. "Well, that's one way to get someone's attention," he said, taking a napkin to help with the cleanup. "I'm truly sorry, sir. I'll have your server bring you a complimentary appetizer." Sofia felt her cheeks burning with embarrassment. "No need," he replied, studying her face with interest. "But I would like to know your name. The tag is a bit crooked." "Sofia," she answered, painfully aware of every imperfection in that moment, her crooked name tag, her accent, the water stain spreading on his sleeve that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "Sofia," he repeated as if testing how the name felt. "I'm Elliot Harrington." The name registered immediately. Harrington Real Estate owned half the luxury developments in Boston. She'd passed their gleaming office tower countless times, a physical reminder of a world entirely separate from hers. "Again, Mr. Harrington, I apologize for the water," Sofia said, reverting to professional mode. "Elliot, please," he insisted, then added with a smile that transformed his face, "and I'll take that complimentary appetizer after all." When her shift ended at 11:30 that night, Sofia was surprised to find Elliot Harrington waiting outside the restaurant's staff exit, leaning against a sleek black car that screamed money. "You're still here," she stated, clutching her backpack tighter, unsure whether to be flattered or concerned. "I thought I might offer you a coffee," he said, straightening up. "There's a place around the corner that stays open late." Sofia hesitated. She had a morning class and another shift at her campus coffee shop job starting at 6. "I should really get home." "Just one coffee," Elliot pressed gently. "Consider it my way of saying no hard feelings about the impromptu shower." Against her better judgment, Sofia found herself nodding. One coffee. The cafe was small but elegant, clearly catering to a clientele that didn't worry about the price of a latte. Elliot ordered for both of them, an Americano for himself and, after asking her preference, a cappuccino for Sofia. "So, Sophia Abrantes," he said once they were seated, her name pronounced with surprising accuracy. "What brings you to Boston?" "School," she replied. "Business administration at Northeastern. I'm in my 3rd year." "From Brazil, I'm guessing? Your accent is lovely." Sophia smiled despite herself. Most Americans either couldn't place her accent or assumed she was Spanish. "Yes, from São Paulo. I came on a student visa." "And you work at Le Marseille to pay for school?" "That and my morning job at the campus coffee shop," she admitted. "Tuition isn't cheap, especially for international students." Elliot looked genuinely impressed. 2 jobs plus full-time studies? That's dedication. As their conversation flowed, Sophia found herself relaxing. Elliot was surprisingly easy to talk to, intelligent without being condescending, curious about her life in Brazil, her family, and her dreams. "My father was an aircraft mechanic," she told him, animation entering her voice as she spoke about her childhood. "He would sometimes take me to the hangar. I grew up loving the smell of jet fuel and the sound of engines." "Is that why you came to America? To work in aviation?" Sophia laughed softly. "No, that was just a childhood fascination. I'm practical enough to know dreams need to be funded. Business administration seemed like a safer path." "Sometimes the unsafe paths lead to the most interesting destinations," Elliot mused, checking his watch. "It's getting late. Can I drive you home?" Sophia hesitated again, but something about his respectful demeanor made her trust him. "That would be nice, thank you." His car was as luxurious inside as it looked from the outside. Sophia gave him the address of her shared apartment in Allston, conscious of the contrast between his world and hers. When they arrived, Elliot turned to her. "I'd like to see you again, Sophia. Properly, not just spilling water on me." She should have said no. Men like Elliot Harrington didn't date immigrant waitresses working 2 jobs to stay afloat. But his blue eyes held genuine interest, not the predatory look she'd learned to recognize from certain customers. "I'd like that," she heard herself say. Their first real date was at Sorellina, an Italian restaurant so exclusive Sophia had only read about it in Boston Magazine. She felt painfully out of place in her best dress, the only nice one she owned, while Elliot greeted the maitre d' by name. "You look beautiful," Elliot said, noticing her discomfort as they were seated. "Truly." "I feel like everyone's staring," she whispered, hyper-aware of her accent, her dress, her everything. "They're staring because you're the most interesting woman here," he replied, taking her hand across the table. "Everyone else is just Boston old money trying to look important. You're authentic." Somehow, he made her believe it. Throughout dinner, Sophia gradually relaxed, finding herself laughing and sharing stories about her family in Brazil, her father's mechanical genius, her mother's cooking, her younger brother's soccer dreams. "I miss them every day," she admitted, "but I call my mom every Sunday. Phone cards are my biggest expense after rent." "What made you choose Boston specifically?" Elliot asked, genuinely curious. "The schools, mainly, and it reminded me a little of São Paulo. A big city with character, not just skyscrapers." She paused, then added with a smile, "Though your winters are trying to kill me." Elliot laughed, a sound Sophia was coming to cherish. "I'll have to keep you warm then." As their relationship blossomed over the following weeks, Sophia experienced a Boston she hadn't known existed. Rooftop bars with panoramic views, private art gallery openings, dinners at restaurants where chefs came tableside to greet Elliot personally. One evening, Elliot took her to his penthouse apartment overlooking Boston Harbor. The floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a cityscape glittering with lights, the dark water beyond reflecting the moon. "This is breathtaking," Sophia whispered, standing by the window, the city at her feet. "It's just real estate," Elliot said, coming to stand behind her. "Buildings and glass. You're breathtaking." When he kissed her, the city lights blurred behind her closed eyelids. For the first time since arriving in America, Sophia felt like she belonged somewhere, not to Boston, but to this moment, this feeling, this man. For her birthday in March, Elliot presented her with a box from Neiman Marcus. Inside was a midnight blue dress that Sophia knew instinctively cost more than her monthly rent. "Elliot, I can't accept this," she protested, even as her fingers traced the silk material reverently. "Of course you can," he insisted. "I want to take you somewhere special tonight, and I thought you might like something new to wear." The dress fit perfectly. Standing before the mirror in her cramped bedroom, Sophia barely recognized herself. The woman reflected back looked elegant, sophisticated, like she belonged in Elliot's world. That night, after dinner at a restaurant whose name Sophia couldn't pronounce, Elliot whispered the words she'd been afraid to hope for. "I love you." On Sunday, during her weekly call home, Sophia couldn't contain her happiness. "Maman, I've met someone," she told her mother in rapid Portuguese. "His name is Elliot. He's kind and smart and successful. Does he treat you well, minha filha?" her mother asked, the concern in her voice transcending the static of the international connection. "Better than I ever imagined," Sophia replied honestly. "He makes me feel like anything is possible." "Then I'm happy for you," her mother said simply. "When will we meet this man who has stolen my daughter's heart?" The question lingered after they hung up. Sophia and Elliot had never discussed a future that concrete. Visits to Brazil, meeting families. Their relationship existed in a beautiful bubble of Boston nights and weekend mornings, separate from the realities of immigration paperwork and cultural differences. The bubble began to thin when Elliot invited Sophia to dinner at his parents' mansion in Beacon Hill. The house was imposing, all historical architecture and old money, and Sophia felt her confidence wavering as they approached the door. "They'll love you," Elliot assured her, squeezing her hand. "Just be yourself." Gerald and Margaret Harrington were polite but reserved. Throughout dinner, Sophia felt their assessing gazes, noting her accent, her mannerisms, the way she occasionally searched for the right English word. "So, Sophia," Margaret said over dessert, her voice cultured and controlled, "Elliot tells us your family is in Brazil. What do they do there?" "My father is an aircraft mechanic and my mother is a teacher," Sophia answered proudly. "My younger brother is studying engineering." "How nice," Margaret replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It must be difficult for them, knowing you're so far away, trying to fit into a world that wasn't made for people like, well, you." A heavy silence fell over the table. Sophia felt Elliot tense beside her, but before he could speak, she responded with dignity. "My family taught me that there aren't separate worlds, Mrs. Harrington, just people who choose to build walls." Her voice was calm, her accent suddenly a badge of honor rather than something to minimize. "And they're very proud that I'm creating opportunities they couldn't have imagined." The conversation moved on, but the undercurrent of disapproval remained. As they left that night, Elliot was unusually quiet. "I'm sorry about my mother," he finally said as they drove back to Sophia's apartment. "She's traditional." "It's okay," Sophia assured him, though the sting of the interaction lingered. "Not everyone will understand us being together." Elliot pulled the car over suddenly, turning to face her. "Listen to me. What's between us is real. Social differences, cultural backgrounds, those are just details, not barriers. I love you, Sophia Abrantes." In that moment, with the city lights playing across his earnest face, Sophia believed him completely. She believed that their love could transcend class divides and cultural differences. She believed that they were writing their own story, one that defied expectations and prejudices. As Sophia drifted to sleep in Elliot's arms that night, she couldn't have imagined that in less than a year, she would be alone, pregnant, and abandoned by the man who had promised that social differences were merely unimportant details. Sophia's world changed on a crisp October morning, 1 year and 3 months into her relationship with Elliot. The pregnancy test lay on her bathroom counter, its 2 pink lines unmistakable against the white plastic. She stared at it, time stretching around her, The cramped bathroom of her shared apartment suddenly too small to contain the magnitude of what was happening. "This can't be right," she whispered to her reflection, panic rising in her chest. She'd been careful, they'd been careful, yet there it was, indisputable evidence that her life was about to change irrevocably. Sophia sank onto the closed toilet lid, her hands shaking. Her student visa would expire after graduation next spring. Her 2 jobs barely covered rent and tuition. And Elliot, what would Elliot say? They'd never discussed children. Their conversations about the future remained comfortably vague. Travels together, perhaps Sophia joining the Harrington business after she graduated. Nothing concrete, nothing permanent. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "One step at a time," she murmured, echoing her mother's favorite advice. First, she needed to be certain. She would buy another test. 3 days and 2 additional positive tests later, Sophia could no longer deny the truth. She was approximately 6 weeks pregnant, and she needed to tell Elliot. Morning sickness hit her hard the following week. At the campus coffee shop, the smell of brewing espresso that once comforted her now sent her rushing to the bathroom. "Sophia, this is the 3rd time this week you've disappeared during the morning rush," her manager said, arms crossed as Sophia emerged from the restroom, face pale. "I need reliable employees." "I'm sorry, I think I might have a stomach bug," she lied, wiping cold sweat from her forehead. "Well, get it checked out, and if you can't make your shift tomorrow, don't bother coming back." The manager's words were harsh but not unexpected in the high-turnover world of service jobs. The next morning, when nausea forced her to call out sick, Sophia received a terse text message. "Position filled. Final check available Friday." 1 job gone. Panic squeezed her chest as she calculated her dwindling finances. Her portion of the rent was due in 10 days, and her roommates, other international students on tight budgets, had made it clear they couldn't cover for anyone. In the bathroom mirror, Sophia practiced telling Elliot about the pregnancy. "We're having a baby," she whispered, trying to sound confident, excited even. But her voice trembled, betraying her fear. Another wave of nausea interrupted her rehearsal. As she bent over the toilet, tears mingled with the bitter taste in her mouth. She needed to tell him soon, maybe tonight. But that evening, Elliot called to cancel their plans. A late meeting with Chinese investors. The following night, he was attending a charity gala with his parents. By the time Sophia saw him 3 days later, dark circles had formed under her eyes from stress and morning sickness. "You look tired," Elliot noted as they sat at their usual table at Le Bordeaux, the most expensive restaurant in Boston, where the staff knew him by name and never asked to see a menu. "Is everything okay?" "Just working hard," Sophia replied, avoiding his eyes. She hadn't touched her wine, a detail Elliot hadn't yet noticed. She'd chosen this restaurant deliberately, a public place where Elliot always maintained impeccable manners. Surely he wouldn't make a scene here among Boston's elite, regardless of how he felt about the news. As the waiter brought their appetizers, Sophia gathered her courage. "Elliot, there's something important I need to tell you." He looked up from his phone, giving her his full attention, something she usually appreciated about him. Now, his intense blue gaze made her heart race with anxiety. "I'm pregnant," she said simply, the words hanging in the air between them. Elliot froze, his fork suspended halfway to his mouth. The silence stretched for one excruciating moment, then another. "You're what?" His voice was low, controlled, but Sophia could see the muscle in his jaw twitching, a sign of tension she'd learned to recognize. "I'm pregnant. About 7 weeks now." She reached for her water glass, her mouth suddenly dry. "I know we haven't talked about children, but is it mine?" The question cut through her words like a knife. Sophia felt as though she'd been slapped. "How can you ask me that?" she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "Of course it's yours. There's been no one else." Elliot set down his fork with deliberate care, his face transforming from shock to something colder, more calculated. "Did you do this on purpose?" "What?" "Get pregnant. On purpose." His voice remained low, but each word struck with precision. "Is this how you Brazilian girls get your green cards?" The tears that had threatened now spilled over, hot tracks down Sophia's cheeks. "How could you say that to me? I would never—" "Be realistic, Sophia." Elliot leaned forward, his handsome face hardened into something unrecognizable. "Look at you, and look at me. Our lives don't even exist in the same universe. You were always a temporary diversion, never a permanent plan." Each word penetrated Sophia's heart, dissolving the carefully constructed fantasy she'd built around their relationship. This couldn't be happening. Not Elliot, who whispered he loved her, who said social differences were just unimportant details. "I thought you loved me," she managed, her voice breaking. Elliot sighed, suddenly looking annoyed rather than angry. "Love is a complicated word. I enjoyed our time together, but let's not pretend this was heading towards some fairy tale ending." Sophia couldn't speak, her throat constricting with pain. Around them, diners continued their elegant meals, oblivious to the destruction occurring at their table. Elliot signaled for the waiter. "Check, please," he said crisply, then reached into his suit jacket for his checkbook. The leather-bound book emerged, a symbol of the wealth that had always separated them, despite her attempts to ignore it. $50,000, he said, writing with swift, confident strokes. "That's more than enough to take care of this problem or go back to Brazil. Choose whichever option you prefer, but don't contact me again." He tore the check from the book and placed it on the table between them, next to the untouched appetizers that suddenly looked grotesque to Sophia, colorful arrangements of food that cost more than what she earned in a day. Elliot stood, adjusting his tie. "I'm sorry it ended this way. Truly." His voice contained no genuine remorse, only the polite facade he maintained in public. Without another word, he walked away, leaving Sophia alone at the table, surrounded by whispers and curious glances. She sat frozen, tears flowing freely now, the check lying before her like a bitter joke. $50,000, the price Elliot Harrington placed on their child, on her dignity. Eventually, a sympathetic waiter helped her gather her belongings and call a taxi. Sophia clutched her purse, the check stuffed inside, feeling hollow and numb as Boston's glittering skyline passed by the window. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of grief and practical crises. Sophia couldn't afford to miss work at Le Marseille, despite persistent morning sickness that now stretched into afternoon. But after the third time she rushed from the dining room to vomit, the manager pulled her aside. "Whatever's going on with you, it's affecting your performance," he said, not unkindly. "Take some time off. Come back when you're better." They both knew it was a polite firing. 2 jobs gone in less than 2 weeks. Without income, Sophia couldn't pay her portion of the rent. Her roommates were sympathetic but firm. They had their own financial struggles. "We found someone to take your room," Maya told her gently. "You have until the end of the week." That night, curled on her bed, Sophia tried calling Elliot. The call went straight to voicemail. She tried again the next morning, and the next. Each attempt met with the same automated response. After her 20th call, she received a terse text message from an unknown number. "This is Elliot's attorney. Further contact will be considered harassment. The offer in the check is final." Desperation drove Sophia to the gleaming Harrington real estate headquarters downtown. The security guard at the reception desk eyed her warily as she approached. "I need to see Elliot Harrington," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Do you have an appointment?" the guard asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "No, but it's important. Please tell him Sofia Abrantes is here." The guard made a call, speaking quietly into the phone. His expression changed subtly as he listened to the response. "Ms. Abrantes," he said, hanging up. "Mr. Harrington is unavailable. Furthermore, I've been instructed to inform you that if you return to these premises, the company will seek a restraining order against you. Sophia felt the eyes of everyone in the lobby, employees, clients, other security personnel, watching her, judging her. The shame burned hotter than her anger as she turned and walked out, dignity in tatters. With nowhere else to turn, Sophia used her last money to visit a public hospital clinic. The waiting room was crowded with others like her, people without insurance, without resources, clutching numbered tickets and waiting hours to be seen. When Sophia finally entered the examination room, the technician performing the ultrasound was brusque, but not unkind. "First pregnancy?" she asked, squeezing cold gel onto Sophia's still flat stomach. "Yes," Sophia whispered, eyes fixed on the ceiling, trying not to cry. "Let's see what we've got here," the technician murmured, moving the wand across Sophia's abdomen. After a moment of silence, she said, "Oh." Sophia's heart clenched with fear. "Is something wrong?" "No, nothing wrong." The technician adjusted the screen so Sophia could see. "But there are 2 heartbeats. You're carrying twins." The world seemed to stop. On the grainy black and white screen, Sophia could make out 2 tiny, fluttering pulses. 2 lives, 2 hearts beating inside her. "Twins," she repeated, the word foreign on her tongue. In that cold hospital room, staring at the evidence of 2 lives depending entirely on her, something shifted in Sophia's soul. A steely determination replaced the hollow ache of abandonment. These were her children, not just Elliot's discarded problem, but her family. That evening, in the cheap motel room she'd rented with her dwindling savings, Sophia removed Elliot's check from her purse. $50,000. Enough to solve her immediate problems, enough perhaps for an abortion or a flight back to Brazil in defeat. With steady hands, she tore the check into tiny pieces. "My children will not be bought," she whispered to the empty room. The next morning, Sophia began rebuilding her life with single-minded focus. She withdrew from her university classes, promising herself it was temporary. She found a room to rent in a cramped apartment in Dorchester, sharing with a Brazilian family who took pity on her situation. Through connections in the Brazilian community, she secured 3 jobs: morning shifts, cleaning offices in the financial district, afternoons as a receptionist at a gym where the manager didn't mind her pregnancy as long as she could answer phones, and weekend waitressing at a Brazilian restaurant in Cambridge where the tips were poor but they paid in cash. Between shifts, Sophia devoured books on entrepreneurship and aviation, rekindling the childhood passion inspired by her father. In rare moments of rest, she would place her hands on her growing belly, whispering to her children in Portuguese, telling them stories of resilience and promise. In her 6th month, heavy with twins but still working, Sophia was cleaning the conference room at Boston Air Charter, a private jet company serving corporate clients. Through the glass walls, she observed executives arguing about their expansion plans. "We're losing Brazilian clients to competitors," one man insisted, slamming his hand on the table. "They want pilots who speak their language, who understand their culture. Our communication problems are costing us millions." Another executive scoffed. "Where exactly do you propose we find experienced pilots who are fluent in Portuguese, Spanish, and English? They don't exactly grow on trees." Sophia paused her cleaning, the conversation igniting a spark of recognition, a gap in the market, a need unmet, a problem she was uniquely positioned to understand. After the executives left, Sophia sat alone in the empty conference room, the cleaning supplies forgotten beside her. She placed her hands on her swollen belly, feeling the twins move beneath her touch. "One day, you will have the world he denied us," she promised quietly. "One day, he will look up and see us flying." The next 2 weeks unfolded like a nightmare Sophia couldn't wake from. With both jobs gone and her savings rapidly dwindling, the $50,000 check, now in fragments, haunted her thoughts during sleepless nights. Had she made a terrible mistake? The practical side of her brain argued that pride wouldn't pay rent or medical bills. Yet something deeper, a voice that sounded remarkably like her mother's, whispered that some prices were too high to pay. On a rainy Tuesday morning, Sophia returned to her apartment to find her suitcase waiting by the door. Maya, her roommate of 2 years, couldn't meet her eyes. "I'm really sorry, Sophia," Maya said, arms crossed protectively over her chest. "We held off as long as we could, but the new tenant is moving in tomorrow." Sophia nodded numbly. She had expected this, but the reality still stung. "I understand. Thank you for the extra days." "Do you have somewhere to go?" Maya asked, guilt evident in her voice. "Yes," Sophia lied, forcing a smile. "I've made arrangements." The truth was, she had nowhere. With only $300 to her name and no income, Sophia spent that night in a youth hostel, surrounded by backpackers exploring Boston for fun while she fought back tears of desperation. The following morning, she tried calling Elliot again. His number had been her lifeline for over a year, the person she called with good news, bad news, or just to hear his voice. Now, the automated message informed her that the number she was trying to reach was no longer accepting her calls. Rain pounded the sidewalk as Sophia stood in a phone booth near Boston Common, punching in Elliot's number for what felt like the 100th time. Same result. She tried his office line. The receptionist recognized her name immediately. "I'm sorry, Ms. Abrantes, but Mr. Harrington has left instructions not to put through your calls." Desperation made Sophia reckless. "Please, just tell him I need to talk to him. It's about the baby." "I'm not authorized to relay messages," the receptionist interrupted, her voice colder now. "Please don't call again." The line went dead. Sophia leaned against the glass of the phone booth, watching pedestrians hurry past with umbrellas and raincoats, everyone with somewhere to go, someone waiting for them. The isolation felt physical, as if she existed behind a barrier separating her from the normal world. 3 days later, after moving to an even cheaper hostel, Sophia made her final attempt to reach Elliot. The imposing glass tower of Harrington Real Estate reflected the morning sun as she approached, rehearsing what she would say. She wouldn't beg. She wouldn't even ask for money. She just wanted him to acknowledge that these were his children too. The security guard at the reception desk eyed her suspicious belly, visible now under her raincoat. "Can I help you?" "I need to see Elliot Harrington," Sophia said, summoning the last of her dignity. "My name is Sophia Abrantes." The guard's expression changed, a flicker of recognition followed by discomfort. He picked up the phone, spoke briefly in hushed tones, then replaced the receiver. "I'm sorry, Ms. Abrantes," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "Mr. Harrington is unavailable." "I'll wait," Sophia insisted, moving toward a leather sofa in the lobby. The guard stood up. "I've been instructed to inform you that if you don't leave immediately, the company will seek a restraining order against you." The words echoed in the marble lobby. Several well-dressed people turned to stare. Sophia felt her face burning with humiliation as the guard continued. "Furthermore, Mr. Harrington's legal team has prepared documentation regarding your attempts to contact him. They're prepared to characterize it as harassment." Sophia stood frozen, one hand instinctively moving to protect her belly. This was Elliot's response. Not concern, not responsibility, but legal threats. The final confirmation that the man she had loved existed only in her imagination. Without another word, Sophia turned and walked out, holding her head high despite the tears threatening to spill. Outside, she leaned against the building's cold exterior, invisible to the executives entering and exiting through revolving doors. In that moment, she made another promise to herself. She would never again put herself at the mercy of someone who saw her as disposable. With nowhere else to turn, Sophia reluctantly reached out to the Brazilian Community Center, where a social worker helped her apply for emergency Medicaid. The following week, she found herself in the crowded waiting room of a public hospital, surrounded by others in similar circumstances. Women alone, many of them immigrants, some visibly pregnant, all clutching numbered tickets. 4 hours passed before Sophia's number was called. The examination room was cold and clinical. Nothing like the private OB/GYN office Elliot had insisted on for her first appointment when they still believed they were building a future together. The ultrasound technician, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes but gentle hands, squirted cold gel onto Sophia's exposed abdomen. "First pregnancy?" she asked, moving the wand methodically. "Yes," Sophia whispered, staring at the ceiling tiles to avoid crying. The technician was quiet for a moment, her eyes fixed on the screen. Then she made a small sound of surprise. "Oh." Sophia's heart contracted with fear. "Is something wrong with the baby?" "Not wrong," the technician said, adjusting the monitor so Sophia could see. "But there are 2 heartbeats. You're carrying twins." Sophia stared at the screen, unable to process the information. 2 tiny pulsing dots appeared in the grainy black and white image. 2 lives, 2 hearts, 2 children who would depend entirely on her. "Twins," she repeated, the word foreign on her tongue. "Congratulations," the technician said, studying Sophia's face with compassion. "Would you like to know the estimated due date?" Sophia nodded mutely, still transfixed by the image on the screen. Twins. The revelation changed everything, doubling both her fear and her determination. Later that evening, in the tiny room she'd rented by the week in a rundown boarding house, Sophia sat on the edge of the sagging mattress and removed the torn pieces of Elliot's check from her wallet. $50,000. The price he'd placed on erasing his responsibility, on removing her and their children from his perfect life. With deliberate movements, Sophia gathered the fragments and tore them into even smaller pieces. "My children will not be bought," she whispered to the empty room. That night, something shifted in Sophia. The grief and betrayal didn't disappear, but they were joined by a fierce, protective determination. She would find a way forward, not just for herself, but for the 2 lives growing inside her. Through connections at the Brazilian Community Center, Sophia secured a small room in a crowded apartment in Dorchester, sharing with a family from Recife who took pity on her situation. Maria, the matriarch, had 5 children of her own, but made space for Sophia at their dinner table each night. "My cousin works for a cleaning company downtown," Maria told her one evening. "They're always looking for people. The pay isn't much, but it's something." The following Monday, Sophia began working for Elite Commercial Cleaning, arriving at office buildings in the financial district before dawn to vacuum carpets and empty trash bins before the executives arrived. The work was physically demanding, especially with her growing belly, but the early hours meant she could finish by mid-morning. Through another Brazilian connection, Sophia secured an afternoon position as a receptionist at a fitness center in Somerville. The owner, a former bodybuilder named Tony, didn't mind her pregnancy as long as she could answer phones and process memberships. "Just let me know when you need time off for the baby," he said gruffly, but not unkindly. "My sister had twins. It's no joke." On weekends, Sophia worked as a waitress at Sabor do Brasil, a small restaurant in Cambridge popular with homesick Brazilian students. The tips were meager compared to Le Marseille, but the owner paid in cash and let her take home leftover food at the end of each shift. Between her 3 jobs, Sophia earned just enough to pay rent, buy prenatal vitamins, and save a small amount each week for the baby's arrival. The pace was grueling, but she refused to complain. Each shift, each dollar earned, was a step toward independence. During rare moments of rest, Sophia returned to her childhood passion. She borrowed books on aviation from the public library, studying the technical aspects of aircraft operation and the business models of charter companies. She also practiced her Spanish, already fluent in Portuguese and English, recognizing that trilingual skills were valuable in an increasingly global market. In her 6th month of pregnancy, Sophia's cleaning route included the offices of Boston Air Charter, a private jet company serving corporate clients. Each morning, she dutifully vacuumed the plush carpets of their reception area and emptied the waste paper baskets in executive offices, invisible to the well-dressed employees who arrived later. One Wednesday morning, Running behind schedule due to morning sickness that persisted well into her second trimester, Sophia was still cleaning the large conference room when executives began gathering for an early meeting. She kept her head down, trying to finish quickly, as men in expensive suits filed in, barely glancing at the pregnant cleaning woman in their midst. As Sophia emptied the last trash bin, the meeting began, the participants seemingly unconcerned about her presence, or perhaps not noticing her at all. "The Brazilian market is slipping through our fingers," declared a silver-haired man at the head of the table, slamming down a report. "Jet Corp secured 3 major contracts last quarter that should have been ours. Their entire sales team is bilingual," another executive pointed out. "Our clients report communication problems with our pilots and crew. It's not just about speaking the language, it's cultural understanding." The silver-haired man, clearly the CEO, scoffed. "Where exactly do you propose we find experienced pilots who are fluent in Portuguese, Spanish, and English? They don't exactly grow on trees." Sophia paused by the door, the executive's conversation igniting a spark in her mind. A gap in the market, a need unmet, a problem she understood intimately from both sides. After finishing her morning shift, Sophia couldn't stop thinking about the meeting she'd overheard. Instead of going directly to the gym for her afternoon job, she stopped at the public library and spent an hour researching the private aviation industry, focusing on routes between North and South America. The pattern was clear. Demand for business travel between the US and Latin America was growing exponentially, but cultural and language barriers created constant friction. American companies struggled to provide authentic service to Latin American clients, while Latin American companies often lacked the infrastructure and connections in major US cities. That evening after her shift at the gym, Sophia returned to her small room exhausted but energized by a growing idea. She pulled out a notebook and began outlining a business concept, not for now, but for the future. Something that would combine her language skills, cultural knowledge, and newfound understanding of aviation. The next morning, Sophia arrived at Boston Air Charter earlier than usual. The offices were empty, the executives from yesterday's meeting long gone to their homes in affluent suburbs. In the silent conference room, she set down her cleaning supplies and moved to the head of the table where the CEO had sat. Sophia lowered herself carefully into the leather executive chair, feeling the twins shift inside her. She placed her hands on her swollen belly and looked out at the empty seats surrounding the table. "One day, you will have the world he denied us," she promised quietly. "One day, he will look up and see us flying." As she promised her unborn children a better future, Sophia couldn't have imagined that the conference room she now cleaned would one day be the place where she would close deals that would transform the executive aviation industry forever. The dawn light filtered through the blinds of Sophia's rented room as she massaged her lower back, now perpetually aching under the weight of her 6-month pregnancy. Her uniform for elite commercial cleaning strained across her growing belly despite the 2 sizes she'd gone up. With twins, she looked further along than she was, drawing concerned looks from strangers on the bus each morning. "Just a few more hours," she murmured, smoothing the fabric over her stomach as she prepared for another day of invisibility, cleaning the offices of people who would never know her name. By 7:30, Sophia was mopping the hallway outside the executive offices at Boston Air Charter when nausea hit her again. Morning sickness was supposed to end after the first trimester, but her body hadn't received the memo. She barely made it to the bathroom, retching painfully while clutching her stomach protectively. "Are you all right in there?" A woman's voice called through the door. Sophia emerged, pale and embarrassed, to find a flight attendant in a crisp Boston Air Charter uniform looking at her with concern. "I'm fine, thank you. Just pregnancy?" She gestured vaguely at her belly. The flight attendant smiled. "My sister had twins last year. She said it was like regular pregnancy, but on steroids." She handed Sophia a bottle of water from her bag. "Keep hydrated, it helps." That small kindness nearly broke Sophia. For months, she'd been fighting alone, pushing through exhaustion and fear. This simple human acknowledgement of her struggle felt like the first rain after drought. Later that afternoon, Sophia's supervisor at Elite Commercial Cleaning called her into his cramped office. "I've received complaints," he said without preamble. "Clients say you're too slow and someone reported seeing you vomit in a client bathroom. That's unacceptable." Sophia's heart sank. "I'm sorry, Mr. Peterson. The pregnancy makes it difficult sometimes, but look, I get it. You're in a tough spot." His expression softened slightly. "But we have contracts to fulfill, and I need reliable cleaners." He slid a white envelope across the desk. "This is your final paycheck. I'm sorry." In the corridor outside, Sophia leaned against the wall, fighting tears. 2 jobs lost in as many months. The restaurant had let her go weeks ago when her uniform no longer fit, claiming customers found her distracting. Now the cleaning company. Only her receptionist position at Tony's Fitness remained, and that barely covered rent. In the cramped locker room of Boston Air Charter, Sophia allowed herself 5 minutes of quiet sobbing. 5 minutes to feel the crushing weight of her circumstances. Alone, pregnant with twins, gradually losing her ability to support herself. Then she dried her eyes, squared her shoulders, and calculated whether she could make rent this month with just the gym job. The math didn't work. Even with the Brazilian family charging her below-market rent for her tiny room, Sophia would be short by at least $200, and the babies were coming, requiring supplies she couldn't begin to afford. Sophia lingered in the locker room, reluctant to face the afternoon cold without her cleaning job to go to. She absent-mindedly flipped through a stack of papers someone had left on the bench, documents in Portuguese about flight regulations for operating in Brazilian airspace. The technical language reminded her of her father, how he would explain aircraft mechanics to her as a child. Without thinking, Sophia began organizing the papers, noticing several translation errors that changed the meaning of important safety regulations. "What are you doing?" Sophia jumped, looking up to find a tall man with salt and pepper hair watching her from the doorway. "I'm sorry," she stammered, gathering the papers hastily. "I was just leaving." "Those are my documents," the man said, stepping closer. "Were you reading them?" "No, I mean yes, but I wasn't." Sophia stopped, embarrassed. "There are some translation mistakes. This paragraph about fuel requirements is wrong in the English version." The man raised an eyebrow, taking the papers from her. "You read Portuguese?" "I'm Brazilian," Sophia explained. "Those regulations say minimum fuel reserves must be 20% for domestic flights, but the translation says 12%. That's dangerous." The man studied her for a long moment. "I'm Mark Peterson, Director of Operations. And you are?" "Sophia Abrantes. I clean," she corrected herself. "I cleaned the offices here until about 10 minutes ago." "You were fired?" he asked directly. Sophia nodded, one hand automatically moving to her belly. "The pregnancy makes it difficult to keep up with the cleaning schedule." Mark glanced at her stomach, then back at the papers in his hand. "You said there are other mistakes in these translations?" "Several," Sophia confirmed. "Whoever translated them isn't familiar with aviation terminology. The emergency protocol section is particularly concerning." Something shifted in Mark's expression. Curiosity, perhaps, or recalculation. "Come with me, Ms. Abrantes." He led her to a small office down the hall, gesturing for her to sit while he closed the door. "Our company is expanding operations into Brazil," he explained, sitting behind the desk. "These regulations are critical for our certification process, but we've had endless problems with translations. Our pilots report confusion from Brazilian air traffic control because our paperwork doesn't match their expectations." Sophia nodded, unsurprised. "Technical translation requires specialized knowledge. Aviation has its own vocabulary." "Exactly." Mark leaned forward. "What were you doing before cleaning offices?" "I was a waitress at Le Marseille while studying business administration at Northeastern. Before that, I worked in my father's aircraft maintenance shop in São Paulo." Mark's eyebrows rose. "Your father works in aviation?" Worked, Sophia corrected. He was a mechanic for 27 years. Mark studied her for a moment, then seemed to make a decision. Ms. Abrantes, I have a proposition. We desperately need someone who understands both aviation and Portuguese for our Brazilian expansion. It's a part-time administrative position, but it pays twice what you were making as a cleaner. Sophia stared at him, certain she'd misheard. You're offering me a job? Now? She gestured at her pregnant belly. I'm offering you a job because you just identified errors that could have caused serious regulatory problems or worse, safety issues. He smiled slightly. The pregnancy is your business. The job knowledge is mine. 2 weeks later, Sophia had settled into her role as administrative assistant for international operations at Boston Air Charter. Her desk was small and tucked into a corner, but it was a desk, not a mop or a waitress tray. For the first time since arriving in America, Sophia used her brain more than her body at work. Each morning, she reviewed documents, corrected translations, and communicated with Brazilian aviation authorities, smoothing the way for Boston Air Charter's expansion. Mark Peterson, impressed with her efficiency, gradually increased her responsibilities. The job was a lifeline. The pay allowed Sophia to leave her weekend waitressing position and focus on preparing for the twins' arrival. She found a slightly larger room to rent and began accumulating baby supplies, 2 of everything, bought second-hand but meticulously cleaned. In the evenings, Sophia continued her interrupted education, reading business and aviation books. Though she'd had to withdraw from Northeastern, she was determined to finish her degree someday. Meanwhile, she absorbed everything about Boston Air Charter's operations, studying their business model with quiet intensity. One unseasonably warm April day, Sophia was organizing flight manifests when a sharp pain lanced through her abdomen. She gasped, clutching the edge of her desk as a puddle formed at her feet. "Sophia?" Mark appeared in the doorway, his eyes widening at the scene. "Is it time?" Sophia nodded, unable to speak through the contraction gripping her body. The twins were coming 6 weeks early. "I'll call an ambulance," Mark said, already pulling out his phone. "Don't move." The next hours passed in a blur of pain and clinical efficiency. The ambulance, the hospital admission, the medical team swarming around her with concerned expressions about premature twins. Sophia heard phrases like fetal distress and emergency C-section floating above her, but all she could think was that she was alone in the most important moment of her life. No family, no partner, no one to hold her hand or kiss her forehead or tell her everything would be all right. In the operating room, a kind-eyed nurse squeezed Sophia's hand as the anesthesia took effect. "You're doing great, Mama. We're going to take good care of you and your babies." At 3:17 in the afternoon, Lucas Abrantes entered the world with a powerful cry, followed 2 minutes later by his sister Laura. Despite being premature, both babies were remarkably healthy, small but mighty, as the nurses put it. When Sophia woke in the recovery room, a nurse placed first Lucas, then Laura in her arms. Looking down at their tiny, perfect faces, both with startlingly blue eyes that couldn't yet focus but seemed to search for her, Sophia felt a love so fierce it took her breath away. "It's us 3 against the world now," she whispered, kissing each downy head. On her 3rd day in the hospital, while feeding Laura and watching Lucas sleep in the bassinet beside her bed, Sophia idly picked up a discarded copy of Fortune magazine left by a previous patient. Flipping through its glossy pages, her hand froze mid-turn. There, in a feature on rising stars in real estate, was Elliot's face. Older than in her memories, his hair styled differently, but unmistakably the man who had walked away from her in Le Bordeaux 7 months ago. The headline read, "Harrington Real Estate announces Latin American expansion." In the accompanying interview, Elliot spoke confidently about new developments planned for Brazil, Argentina, and Chile. "We understand the importance of authentic cultural communication in these markets," he was quoted saying. "Our team has spent months building relationships with local partners who share our vision and values." Sophia stared at his words, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. Authentic cultural communication. The man who had dismissed her as a gold-digging foreigner now positioning himself as culturally sensitive to sell luxury condos in her homeland. Laura stirred in her arms, blue eyes, Elliot's eyes, blinking open to study her mother's face. In the bassinet, Lucas made small, dreaming noises, his tiny fist curled beside his cheek. Sophia looked from her children to Elliot's smiling face in the magazine, and something hardened in her resolve. She might be starting from nothing, but she had knowledge he could never buy. True understanding of the cultures he was trying to exploit for profit. "He thinks he understands," she whispered to her sleeping babies. "But I'll show him what authenticity really means." As she cradled her newborn twins in the small hospital room, rocking them while whispering promises in Portuguese, Sophia couldn't imagine that in 5 years, her knowledge of aviation and languages would set her on a path to founding a company that would revolutionize the very market Elliot so desperately wanted to conquer. 5 years passed like the seasons, each with its own struggle and triumph. Sophia Abrantes, now 28, walked through the polished lobby of Boston Air Charter with quiet confidence, a far cry from the frightened pregnant woman who had once cleaned these same floors. The company's sleek downtown office had become her second home, the place where she had rebuilt her life piece by piece after Elliot's devastating rejection. "The Brazilians are arriving at 2 o'clock, reminded Camilla, her assistant. "Conference room is prepped and translations are ready." Sophia nodded, adjusting the lapel of her navy blazer. Modest but professional, purchased from a department store during a sale. Not designer, but respectable. Their flight landed early. I'll meet them at reception. As Director of International Relations, Sophia had become Boston Air Charter's bridge to Latin America. What had begun as a desperate opportunity, a pregnant woman with nothing but language skills and determination, had evolved into a thriving career. Her intimate understanding of both cultures made her invaluable for a company eager to expand southward. Every morning began the same way, waking at 5 to prepare breakfast for the twins, now 5 years old and bursting with energy. Their small apartment in Cambridge wasn't luxurious, but it was clean, safe, and filled with books and toys, evidence of Sophia's careful budgeting and priorities. "Mommy, is today show and tell?" Lucas asked that morning, his blue eyes, so painfully like his father's, bright with excitement as he spooned cereal into his mouth. "That's tomorrow, meu amor," Sophia replied, packing lunchboxes with sandwiches cut into airplane shapes. "Today is just regular school." Laura, already dressed in her uniform, frowned at her reflection in the hallway mirror, attempting to tame her dark curls. "João at school asked why we don't have a daddy," she said matter-of-factly. Sophia stilled, the question hitting her like always, unexpected despite its inevitability. She knelt beside her daughter, meeting those searching blue eyes. "Some families are different, Carita. Some have a mom and dad, some have 2 moms or 2 dads, and some, like us, have just a mom. But we are a complete family, the 3 of us." "But where is he?" Lucas persisted, joining them in the hallway. "Other kids know where their dads are, even if they don't live with them." Sophia had prepared for this question for years, determined to be honest without burdening her children with bitterness. "Some people aren't ready to be parents when the time comes. Your father wasn't ready, so he chose a different path. But that doesn't mean we're missing anything. We have each other." The twins seemed to accept this, as they had before when versions of this conversation arose. Sophia kissed them both, inhaling the scent of baby shampoo and childhood before shepherding them out the door to school. By 9 o'clock, Sophia was reviewing contracts in her office when Mark Peterson, now CEO of Boston Air Charter, knocked on her doorframe. "The Petrobras executives land in 5 hours, he said. "This contract could double our South American business if we close it." Sophia nodded. "I've prepared detailed cultural briefings for our pilots and staff. No mistakes this time." Mark smiled. You've transformed how we do business internationally, Sophia. Remember when I found you correcting those translations in the locker room? Best decision I ever made." After he left, Sophia allowed herself a moment of pride. From cleaning floors to directing international strategy, her journey at Boston Air Charter reflected her personal philosophy: excellence in the face of impossible odds. The meeting with the Brazilian executives began tense but ended triumphantly. When negotiations stalled over flight schedules, Sophia intervened with cultural insight that other executives missed. "Gentlemen," she said in fluent Portuguese, standing to address both sides of the table. "When Mr. Santos mentions flexibility for weekend flights, he's not just concerned about scheduling. In Brazilian business culture, relationships extend beyond office hours. These weekend flights will carry family members, create connections that strengthen our partnership." The Brazilian executives nodded appreciatively, while the Americans looked at Sophia with newfound respect. By day's end, contracts were signed, handshakes exchanged, and Boston Air Charter had secured its largest international deal to date. "That was masterful," Mark told her afterward, as they watched the Brazilians depart. "You just saved us millions in potential misunderstandings. I want to promote you to Director of International Relations officially, with a substantial raise." That evening, Sophia celebrated by taking the twins for ice cream, watching them chatter excitedly about school projects while chocolate smeared their cheeks. These small moments, witnessing their growth, their happiness despite beginning life in such uncertainty, were her greatest reward. Later, after tucking the twins into bed with stories of Brazil and kisses on foreheads, Sophia opened her laptop to continue her online classes. Despite working full-time and raising twins alone, she had never abandoned her goal of completing her business degree. One course at a time, semester after semester, she inched toward graduation. The following spring, under cherry blossoms at Northeastern University, Sophia Abrantes finally received her diploma in business administration. In the audience, Lucas and Laura, now 6 years old, clapped wildly as their mother crossed the stage, their homemade sign reading, "Congratulations, Mommy," visible from even the highest seats. "I'm so proud of you," Maria from the Brazilian family who had first taken her in whispered, hugging Sophia after the ceremony. "From where you started to here? It's incredible." Sophia's eyes found her children, now being swung around by Mark Peterson, who had become something of an uncle figure to them. "They're why I did it," she said simply. "Everything is for them." As Sophia's professional reputation grew, so did her awareness of opportunities beyond Boston Air Charter. During client meetings, executive flights, and industry conferences, she observed a pattern. Communication breakdowns between American aviation companies and Latin American clients weren't isolated to her company, they were industry-wide. One evening, while the twins built elaborate paper airplane cities on the living room floor, Sophia noticed Lucas carefully explaining the control tower procedures to his sister in a mixture of English and Portuguese. "You have to say, 'cleared for takeoff' in both languages," he insisted, "so all the pilots understand." Sophia watched them, an idea forming in her mind. If children understood the importance of clear communication across languages, why did million-dollar companies struggle with the concept? That night, after bedtime stories, Sophia began sketching a business plan. The Abrantes translation services would provide specialized interpreters for aviation companies, focusing on technical terminology and cultural nuances that generic translation services missed. "It's not just about words," she explained to Mark when she shared her idea. "It's about understanding aviation protocols in different cultural contexts." "You're thinking of leaving us?" he asked, concerned. "Not leaving, expanding. I'd still consult for Boston Air Charter, but this would be my own venture." Mark considered this. "It's a solid concept. The industry needs it. What's your startup capital look like?" Sophia's expression faltered. "That's the challenge. Banks aren't eager to lend to a single mother with limited credit history, regardless of my professional track record. The solution came from an unexpected source. At a community dinner at the Brazilian Cultural Center, Sophia presented her business plan, seeking advice rather than funding. To her surprise, 12 people, restaurant owners, mechanics, nurses, all immigrants who had built lives in Boston, offered small investments. "We believe in you," said Carlos, who owned a successful bakery. "When I needed to expand 5 years ago, no bank would help. Our community was my bank. Now I return the favor." With $27,000 in community investment, Sophia rented a small office space, created a professional website, and officially launched Abrantes Translation Services. Her first client came through Mark's recommendation, a charter company struggling with Mexican regulatory documents. Within 6 months, Sophia had hired 3 other multilingual professionals with aviation backgrounds. Within a year, her client list included 7 of the top charter companies on the East Coast. The business model proved itself. Generic translation services couldn't match their specialized knowledge, and aviation companies couldn't afford the mistakes that came from cultural misunderstandings. At home, the twins thrived. Lucas developed an early interest in engineering, building increasingly complex structures with Legos and asking endless questions about how aircraft engines worked. Laura, quieter but equally determined, spent hours with toy planes, creating elaborate stories about pilots traveling the world. "Look, Mommy," Laura said one afternoon, attaching paper wings to her teddy bears. "Now they can fly anywhere they want." Sophia watched her children play, their imaginations soaring despite having never known their father. Elliot's absence, once a wound that seemed impossible to heal, had become merely a fact, no more significant to their daily happiness than the weather. 3 years after launching her translation company, Sophia found herself at the National Business Aviation Convention in Las Vegas, representing Abrantes Translation Services at a professional booth rather than attending as someone else's employee. The confidence that radiated from her, elegant in a simple but well-cut black dress, hair swept into a professional updo, attracted potential clients throughout the day. As she distributed business cards to a group of interested executives, Sophia glanced across the convention floor and froze. Elliot Harrington stood 30 feet away, older now with threads of silver at his temples, examining a display of luxury aircraft interiors. He had not seen her, too absorbed in whatever sales pitch he was receiving. Sophia observed him from a distance, surprised by her own calm. The man who had once reduced her to tears with cruel dismissal now seemed smaller somehow, less intimidating. His expensive suit and practiced charm were the same, but she saw through them now, the superficial trappings of a man whose concept of value began and ended with price tags. He passed by her booth without a second glance, not recognizing the woman he had abandoned pregnant and alone. The woman who now ran a successful company, raised brilliant children, and had built a life he had believed impossible for someone like her. As she watched him disappear into the crowd, Sophia felt neither anger nor vindication, only a peaceful certainty that the path she had forged alone had led her exactly where she needed to be. While Sophia observed Elliot pass by her without a second look, she couldn't know that in just 3 years her translation company would be merely the first step toward creating an empire that would make him remember exactly who she was. 3 years after the aviation convention where Elliot had passed by without recognizing her, Sophia's translation service had become the go-to resource for companies operating between North and South America. Abrantes Translation Services now occupied an entire floor in a modest office building near Logan Airport, employing 25 specialized translators who understood not just languages, but the precise technical vocabulary that aviation demanded. Sophia studied the quarterly revenue report on her desk with satisfaction. What had begun as a community-funded venture with borrowed office furniture had grown into a respected business serving clients across the continent. Yet despite this success, a restlessness had taken root in her mind, a sense that something larger remained just beyond her reach. "Ms. Abrantes?" Her assistant knocked lightly on the doorframe. Your flight to São Paulo has been confirmed. The client sent over the passenger manifest for translation. Sophia nodded her thanks, gathering her belongings. Tomorrow she would accompany executives from American Airlines on their fact-finding mission to Brazil, serving as both translator and cultural consultant. These hands-on trips had become a premium service of her company, commanding fees that once would have seemed impossible. That evening, as Sophia packed her suitcase, the twins, now 8 years old, watched from her bedroom doorway with the solemn expressions they always wore before her business trips. 3 days, she promised, folding a blouse with practiced efficiency. Aunt Maria will stay with you, and I'll call every night. Lucas nodded, his serious face so like her own despite his father's blue eyes. Will you bring back airplane models? Of course, one for each of you. Sophia smiled, then noticed Laura's troubled expression. What's wrong, querida? Why can't we come with you? Laura asked, twisting a strand of dark hair around her finger. We speak Portuguese too. Sophia sat on the edge of the bed, patting the space beside her. Both children climbed up immediately, nestling against her sides as they had since infancy. School is important, she explained, and soon enough you'll travel everywhere with me. But right now, building our future means some sacrifices. Neither child argued, having learned early the reality of their circumstances. Sophia felt the familiar twist of guilt mixed with pride. Guilt for the times she couldn't be with them, pride in their resilience and understanding. The flight to São Paulo the next morning was uneventful until they began their descent. Sophia sat beside Walter Kingsley, VP of International Development for American Airlines, translating as he reviewed documents for their meetings. Around them, other business-class passengers worked on laptops or dozed behind eye masks. "Excuse me," a voice called from across the aisle in heavily accented English. "Is there anyone who speaks Portuguese? I need assistance." Sophia looked up to see an elderly Brazilian man attempting to communicate with a flight attendant who clearly didn't understand his request. Before she could respond, the attendant replied, "I'm sorry, sir. English only." The frustration on the man's face was painfully familiar to Sophia. With a quick apology to Kingsley, she crossed the aisle and addressed the man in fluent Portuguese. "How can I help you, sir?" Relief washed over his features. "Thank you. I'm diabetic and need to know if this meal contains sugar." He gestured to the meal the attendant had served him. Sophia translated for the flight attendant, who looked embarrassed. "I'll check with the galley," she promised, hurrying away. When Sophia returned to her seat, Kingsley was watching her thoughtfully. "That happens a lot, doesn't it?" "More than you'd imagine," Sophia replied. "Not just on flights, but in hotels, at business meetings, everywhere international travelers connect." "It seems inefficient," Kingsley mused. "We spend millions on fancy cabin interiors but can't properly communicate with our passengers." "It's not just American Airlines," Sophia assured him. "Every carrier faces the same challenge." The incident might have been forgotten, but as they disembarked in São Paulo, Sophia witnessed 3 more communication breakdowns. A businessman unable to explain his connecting flight needs, a flight attendant struggling to describe customs procedures, and a passenger trying to locate lost medication. Throughout their 3-day business trip, similar scenes played out repeatedly. In meeting rooms and restaurants, at airport gates and hotel lobbies, Sophia watched as executives who commanded vast resources found themselves reduced to frustrated gestures when language barriers arose. On the return flight, seated in business class with executives who had just signed a multi-million-dollar contract thanks largely to her facilitation, Sophia experienced her epiphany. A distinguished Brazilian CEO was attempting to request a specific meal, but the American flight attendant couldn't understand him. The CEO, accustomed to deference in his own country, looked humiliated. In that moment, everything aligned in Sophia's mind. The gap in the market wasn't just translation services, it was a comprehensive experience. What if a charter airline existed where every touchpoint was bilingual from start to finish? Where pilots, flight attendants, and ground staff all spoke both languages fluently? where the entire experience was designed to bridge cultures, not just transport bodies. As the plane cruised at 37,000 feet, Sophia pulled out her notebook and began writing frantically. By the time they landed in Boston, she had outlined the framework for what would become Abrantes Aviation, a charter airline specifically designed for executives traveling between North and South America, with culture and language integration at its core. Back home, after tucking the twins into bed with the promised airplane models, Sophia spread her notes across the kitchen table. The idea was audacious, possibly foolhardy. Starting an aviation company required capital far beyond what her translation service generated. For 2 weeks, Sophia refined her business plan during every spare moment. Early mornings before the twins woke, late nights after they'd gone to bed, lunch breaks at her office. The concept evolved. Not just bilingual staff, but a genuinely bicultural experience including cuisine, entertainment, and business amenities tailored to Latin American preferences. You want to start an airline? Mark Peterson's eyebrows rose when Sophia presented her plan over lunch. They'd maintained their friendship after she left Boston Air Charter, occasionally meeting to exchange industry insights. Not a commercial airline, Sophia clarified, a specialized charter service for executives traveling between the Americas. The existing options force Latin American clients to adapt to American expectations. I'd reverse that dynamic. Mark studied the financial projections she'd prepared. The concept is solid, but the startup costs... He whistled softly. We're talking millions, Sophia. Do you have investors lined up? Not yet, she admitted, but I've scheduled meetings with several banks next week. Those meetings proved exactly as difficult as Sophia had anticipated. Despite her success with Abrantes translation services, bank after bank declined to fund a startup aviation company led by a single mother with no formal industry credentials. Your business plan is impressive, said the loan officer at the fifth bank, closing her folder, but aviation is high risk even for established companies. Without significant collateral or a partner with industry experience, I can't approve this level of financing. Walking out of the bank into the crisp autumn air, Sophia felt the weight of reality pressing down. Perhaps her vision was too ambitious, too far beyond her reach. She'd built one successful business from nothing. Wasn't that enough? That evening, as she helped the twins with homework at their kitchen table, Lucas looked up from his math problems. Mom, are you sad? You look sad. Sophia forced a smile. Just tired, meu amor. Grown-up work is complicated sometimes. Laura, always perceptive, studied her mother's face. Is it about your new airplane company? We heard you talking on the phone. Sophia sighed. Some parenting books advised shielding children from adult worries, but she'd always been honest with the twins about their circumstances, appropriately framed for their age, but honest nonetheless. Yes, she admitted, starting an airplane company requires a lot of money, and the banks don't think I can do it. Lucas frowned. That's stupid. You can do anything. His simple faith brought tears to Sophia's eyes. Thank you for believing in me. We'll help, Laura declared solemnly. I saved $12 from Grandma Maria's birthday money. Sophia laughed, gathering both children into a fierce hug. Their unconditional belief restored her determination. If not for herself, then for them, she would find a way. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. At a charity event for Brazilian cultural preservation, Sophia reconnected with Eduardo Vasconcelos, a wealthy investor she'd assisted years earlier at Boston Air Charter. When he asked about her current projects, she mentioned her aviation concept casually, not expecting serious interest. Send me your business plan, he said, surprising her. I've been looking to diversify into transportation. 2 weeks later, Sophia sat across from Eduardo and 3 other potential investors in a downtown conference room, presenting her vision for Abrantes Aviation. She spoke with passion about the gap in the market, the untapped potential of truly bilingual service, and the competitive advantage her cultural insights would provide. Many companies claim to understand Latin American markets, she concluded, but they view our culture through an American lens. Abrantes Aviation would reverse that perspective, creating an experience that honors both worlds equally. After intense questioning and 2 follow-up meetings, Sophia secured her first round of funding, $4 million in exchange for 40% equity. Combined with a smaller bank loan that Eduardo's involvement helped facilitate, she had enough to purchase her first aircraft and begin operations. The day Sophia signed the final paperwork, she took the twins to the harbor, their special place for celebrating important moments. As they shared ice cream cones and watched the boats, she told them about the investment. "Does this mean we'll have our own airplane?" Lucas asked, eyes wide. "Better," Sophia smiled. "We'll have our own helicopter first, then airplanes, and someday, if you want, you could fly them." "I want to fly," Laura said immediately, ice cream forgotten. "I want to be a pilot like the ones in your company." "I want to build them," Lucas countered. "I'll make the fastest planes ever." Sophia watched her children dream aloud, their faces animated with possibilities she could never have imagined during those dark days after Elliot abandoned her. From cleaning offices to founding an aviation company, the journey seemed impossible, yet here she stood. 3 months later, on a bright spring morning, Sophia stood on the tarmac at a private airfield outside Boston, the twins beside her, all 3 shielding their eyes against the sun as a gleaming helicopter approached. The aircraft touched down gracefully, its newly painted logo visible as the rotors slowed. A stylized A with wings, the emblem of Abrantes Aviation. The pilot emerged and handed Sophia the keys with a ceremonial flourish. "She's all yours, Ms. Abrantes." Sophia ran her hand along the helicopter's sleek side, feeling the cool metal beneath her fingers. "What do you think we should name her?" she asked the twins. Lucas and Laura exchanged a look, having clearly discussed this already. "Asas Duplas," they said in unison, "double wings." "For us," Laura explained, "and because it has 2 engines," added Lucas, ever practical. Sophia smiled, tears threatening. "It's perfect." As the small family circled the helicopter, exploring every detail of their new beginning, Sophia couldn't know that in just 7 years, this single aircraft would transform into a fleet of 38, valued at billions of dollars, placing her on a collision course with the man who had underestimated her so profoundly. The single helicopter that once represented Sophia's boldest dream became merely the first chapter in an extraordinary story of expansion. From that initial aircraft, christened Asas Duplas in honor of the twins, Abrantes Aviation grew at a pace that astonished even its most optimistic investors. Within 7 years, Sophia had transformed her fledgling charter service into a fleet of 38 aircraft, sleek helicopters and luxurious jets adorned with the now recognizable winged A logo. On a clear September morning in Boston's financial district, Sophia stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office, watching one of her helicopters rise elegantly above the harbor. The aircraft banked slightly, sunlight glinting off its polished exterior as it headed south, carrying Brazilian executives to New York for meetings. The sight never failed to fill her with quiet pride. "The quarterly reports are ready for review," announced Gabriela, her chief financial officer, placing a leather portfolio on Sophia's desk. "Revenue is up 17% from last year. The Miami-Sao Paulo route has exceeded projections by 22%. Sophia turned from the window, her reflection momentarily superimposed over the Boston skyline, a visual metaphor for how completely her life had transformed. At 36, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had built something meaningful against impossible odds. Her simple but elegant charcoal suit was from a respected designer, not flashy, but quality that conveyed success without ostentation. "What about the Chicago expansion?" Sophia asked, moving to her desk. "Ahead of schedule. The hangar renovations will be completed next month, and pilot recruitment is nearly finished. We've hired 6 more Spanish, Portuguese, English trilingual crew members." Sophia smiled, remembering the industry skeptics who had dismissed her insistence on multilingual staff as an unnecessary expense. Now her competitors scrambled to replicate the Abrantes model, always several steps behind. "The Northwestern MBA students are arriving at 11 for your talk," Gabriella reminded her, and Time magazine called again about the Women Reshaping Business feature. Sophia nodded, glancing at the framed cover of Forbes on her wall from the previous year, her own face looking back under the headline, "The Immigrant's Flight Path: How Sophia Abrantes Built a Billion-Dollar Aviation Empire." The article had detailed her journey from cleaning offices to commanding a fleet that specialized in executive travel between the Americas. What the glossy feature hadn't captured was the true heart of Abrantes Aviation's success: Sophia's revolutionary approach to hiring. While competitors recruited primarily from traditional aviation schools, predominantly white, male, and American, Sophia actively sought out Latin American pilots relocating to the U.S., women returning to work after raising children, and other overlooked talent pools. "Mr. Reynolds from United called again," Gabriella said, checking her tablet. "They want to discuss their diversity initiative. Basically, they want to know how we've managed to recruit so many female pilots when they can barely find any." Sophia laughed softly. "Tell him our secret is simple: we actually hire them." Her hiring philosophy hadn't been purely altruistic. Sophia recognized that pilots from Latin America already understood the culture and expectations of the clients they served. Women pilots, so often passed over by major airlines, proved exceptionally loyal to a company that valued them. What began as intuition had become Abrantes Aviation's signature strength, a workforce that reflected the diverse markets it served. Later that morning, after addressing the MBA students, Sophia headed home to change before an evening fundraiser. The penthouse apartment overlooking Boston Harbor was a far cry from the cramped room she'd rented after Elliot's abandonment. Yet Sophia had deliberately kept it warm and unpretentious. Family photos lined the entryway, showcasing the twins' growth from infants to teenagers. "Mom, check this out!" Lucas called from his bedroom as Sophia entered. At 15, he had his father's height and blue eyes, but his enthusiastic intelligence was all his own. He beckoned her to his desk, where a complex drone prototype sat partially assembled. "It's for the MIT engineering competition," he explained, pointing out the specialized rotors he'd designed. "If it works, it could revolutionize search and rescue operations in mountain terrain." Sophia examined the intricate creation, amazed as always by her son's technical brilliance. Lucas had been designing and building things since he could walk, his childhood fascination with aircraft evolving into serious engineering talent. At 15, he'd already been pre-accepted to MIT's special engineering program, his prototype drones winning national competitions. "It's incredible," she said, genuinely impressed. "When's the competition?" "Next month. Professor Hirsch thinks I have a shot at the grand prize." Lucas adjusted a minuscule component with steady hands. "Oh, and Laura's out on the balcony. She aced her solo flight evaluation." Sophia found her daughter on the terrace, still wearing her flight school uniform, staring out at the harbor with quiet satisfaction. If Lucas had inherited Elliot's looks with Sophia's determination, Laura was the inverse. Sophia's dark hair and delicate features combined with her father's focused intensity. "Congratulations on your evaluation," Sophia said, joining her daughter at the railing. Laura smiled, eyes bright with accomplishment. "Youngest in the class to complete all solo requirements. Mr. Stevenson said I have natural command presence." At 15, Laura had already logged more flight hours than most adult students, her passion for aviation matching Sophia's own. When she'd expressed interest in becoming a pilot, Sophia had arranged proper lessons, watching with pride as her daughter took to the skies with intuitive skill. "The Air Force Academy recruiter called again?" Laura mentioned casually, though Sophia could hear the underlying excitement. "He said my application is extremely competitive even for early admission." Sophia put her arm around Laura's shoulders, heart swelling with pride and a touch of wonder. These remarkable young people, once tiny, vulnerable twins she'd feared she couldn't adequately provide for, were now forging their own ambitious paths, undaunted by challenges that would intimidate most adults. That evening, at a Harvard Business School event where Sophia had been invited to speak about immigrant entrepreneurship, a packed auditorium listened intently as she shared her journey. She never mentioned Elliot by name in these talks, but his shadow lingered in the carefully edited version of her story, the unnamed challenges and setbacks that had forced her to rebuild from nothing. "The most valuable skill in business isn't found in textbooks," she told the rapt audience. "It's the ability to transform rejection into determination, to use every no as fuel for your next attempt." After her speech, as attendees gathered to ask questions, Sophia noticed a familiar name on the guest list: Margaret Harrington, Elliot's mother. The woman who had once condescendingly suggested Sophia was trying to fit into a world that wasn't made for people like her was now attending a talk where Sophia was the honored speaker. The irony wasn't lost on her, though Sophia felt no need to seek the woman out. Success, as her mother always said, was the best response to those who doubted you. Later that week, Sophia sat in her office reviewing the final paperwork for the Chicago expansion when her assistant interrupted with news. "The Harrington real estate report was just published," she said, handing Sophia a business magazine. Page 17. Sophia rarely kept track of Elliot's company, but something in her assistant's tone made her turn to the indicated page. The article detailed how Harrington Real Estate, once a dominant force in Northeast commercial development, was struggling to adapt to digital disruption. Younger, tech-savvy competitors were eating into their market share, and their Latin American expansion, once touted as visionary, had faltered due to cultural integration challenges. A small photo showed Elliot, now 44, looking more like his father than the young man Sophia had known. His hair had receded significantly, and his face had hardened into lines that suggested stress rather than character. The caption noted he had taken over as CEO after his father's retirement, but stock had fallen 23% under his leadership. Sophia closed the magazine feeling neither vindication nor pity, just a distant acknowledgement that life moved in unexpected directions. While Elliot struggled to maintain the business he'd inherited, she had built something new from nothing but determination and insight. That weekend, as Sophia piloted one of her company helicopters with the twins as passengers, a monthly tradition that combined family time with Laura's ongoing flight training, Lucas pointed out the Harrington building as they passed over downtown. "That used to be the tallest building in the financial district, right?" he asked, more interested in architecture than the name. "Yes," Sophia confirmed, adjusting their altitude. "When I first came to Boston, it dominated the skyline." Now the Harrington building was dwarfed by newer, sleeker towers, a physical manifestation of how the company had been overtaken by more innovative competitors. Sophia felt a strange symmetry in the visual metaphor as she guided the helicopter higher, leaving the old landmark behind. The following Monday, Sophia's executive team gathered to discuss the company's biggest move yet, an initial public offering that would value Abrantes Aviation at over $2 billion. After years of private ownership, Sophia had decided the time was right to take the company public, allowing for even greater expansion. The banks have confirmed the valuation range between $1.8 and $2.1 billion, reported James Chen, their chief investment officer. The roadshow begins next month, with the official announcement at the annual Executive Aviation Conference here in Boston. "Who's on the invitation list?" Sophia asked, reviewing the presentation materials. "Industry leaders, major investors, financial press," James replied. "The usual suspects for an IPO of this size. The conference organizers have added their own VIPs as well." Sophia nodded, only half listening as she reviewed the prospectus. The journey from that first helicopter to this moment, preparing to ring the bell at the New York Stock Exchange, seemed almost dreamlike in its improbability. 2 weeks before the conference, as final preparations for the IPO announcement were underway, Sophia's assistant placed a complete attendee list on her desk. Thought you might want to review this before approving the seating arrangements for the announcement. Sophia scanned the list casually until a name near the bottom caught her eye. Elliot Harrington, President, Massachusetts Business Association. Her hand stilled on the page. Of course, Elliot had recently been appointed to lead the association, a position his father had once held. It was a ceremonial role that came with automatic invitations to major business events in Boston. For a moment, Sophia considered whether to have his invitation revoked, but dismissed the thought immediately. After 15 years, Elliot Harrington had no power to affect her or her children. If anything, his presence would underscore just how dramatically their respective trajectories had diverged. That evening, as Sophia adjusted the guest list for the announcement, she added Lucas and Laura to the stage party. They had been part of building Abrantes Aviation from the beginning, from paper airplane games on the living room floor to actual flights across the eastern seaboard. This triumph belonged to them as much as to her. "Are you sure you want us up there?" Lucas asked when she told them at dinner. "It's your big moment." Sophia smiled, reaching across the table to squeeze both their hands. "Every moment that matters has included you two. This company exists because of you, not just for you." The day before the conference, Sophia stood in her closet selecting her outfit for the announcement. Her fingers brushed past designer labels that now filled the space once occupied by discount store finds and second-hand suits. She selected a perfectly tailored navy blue ensemble, professional, powerful, but not flashy. Success without ostentation had become her signature style. As she laid out the outfit, Sophia caught sight of her reflection in the full-length mirror. The frightened young woman who had once cleaned offices while pregnant with twins was unrecognizable in the confident CEO who looked back at her. Yet Sophia never forgot her, kept her close as a reminder of how far they had come together. On the morning of the annual Executive Aviation Conference, Sophia adjusted the small wing-shaped pin on her lapel, a gift from the twins on her 35th birthday, and reviewed her announcement speech one final time. Today, Abrantes Aviation would officially become one of the most valuable aviation charter companies in the country. Across town, Elliot Harrington nervously flipped through the morning edition of the Wall Street Journal, his coffee growing cold beside him. On the front page, Sophia's photo appeared alongside her fleet of aircraft. Beneath the headline, "From Immigrant to Billionaire, Abrantes Aviation prepares historic IPO." His real estate empire, once dominant, now struggled against obsolescence as new digital players revolutionized the market. The Harrington real estate was worth less than half of the company founded by the woman he had abandoned pregnant 15 years earlier. The morning of the conference dawned crisp and clear, the September air carrying just a hint of autumn. Sophia stood at her penthouse window, watching Boston come alive beneath her. 15 years ago, she'd cleaned offices before sunrise. Today, the city spread before her like a kingdom she'd quietly conquered. "Mom, is this tie right?" Lucas appeared in the doorway, fingers fumbling with navy silk. At 15, he stood nearly 6 feet tall, his father's height already evident in his lanky frame. Sophia turned, smiling at her son's reflection in the mirror as she adjusted her pearl earrings. "Come here." She fixed his tie with practiced hands, taking in his features, Elliot's piercing blue eyes, but softer, kinder, filled with an intelligence that ran deeper than mere ambition. "You look perfect," she said, straightening his shoulders. "Very professional." Laura joined them, already immaculate in her tailored blazer, a small pilot's pin affixed to her lapel. "I'm nervous," she admitted, attempting to tame a stray curl. "All those business people staring at us. You pilot helicopters 500 feet above the ground, but you're nervous about a speech?" Lucas teased, dodging his sister's retaliatory swat. Sophia observed her children with quiet pride. Laura, with her determined gaze and precise movements, already carried herself with the confidence of someone who knew exactly who she was meant to become. Lucas, with his brilliant mind and gentle humor, approached the world with both curiosity and compassion. "We're going to make history today," Sophia said, adjusting the small wing-shaped pins on her collar. "Birthday gifts from the twins. Not just business history, but our history." Across town, in the penthouse suite of a building that once dominated Boston's skyline, Elliot Harrington's morning ritual had been disrupted by the Wall Street Journal's front page. His coffee grew cold as he stared at Sophia's photograph, poised and elegant beside her fleet of aircraft, the headline proclaiming her impending billionaire status. From immigrant to billionaire, Abrantes Aviation prepares historic IPO. The surname struck him first, Abrantes. It seemed vaguely familiar, tickling some long-buried memory. Then he studied the woman's face, and the coffee cup nearly slipped from his fingers. Sophia, the Brazilian student he'd dated briefly in his 20s. The girl he'd discarded when she'd become pregnant, convinced she was trying to trap him. It couldn't be her. Yet, as he devoured the article, the details aligned with sickening clarity. Sophia Abrantes, once an immigrant student working multiple jobs, now CEO of a company valued at over $2 billion. The empire she'd built specialized in connecting North and South America through aviation, exactly the markets his own company had tried and failed to bridge. "This is impossible," he muttered, scanning the article for mentions of children, of family. There was nothing specific, just a brief note that she was a single mother who had balanced parenthood with building her empire. The child, his child, would be 15 now. Elliot's hand trembled slightly as he set down the newspaper. As president of the Massachusetts Business Association, he was expected at today's aviation conference. He'd planned to make a brief appearance before attending to more pressing matters. Now, he would be there for the entire event. The Four Seasons Hotel Boston gleamed in the mid-morning sun, its ballrooms transformed for the annual Executive Aviation Conference. Blue and silver decorations, the colors of Abrantes Aviation, adorned the main hall where industry leaders gathered in anticipation of the day's headline announcement. Sophia arrived with the twins an hour early, reviewing last-minute details with her executive team while Lucas and Laura explored the venue, their security detail discreetly following at a distance. "The seating chart has been finalized," her chief of staff confirmed. "You'll announce the IPO valuation at 11, followed by the formal signing ceremony with the underwriters." Sophia nodded, scanning the rapidly filling room. She spotted familiar faces, competitors, colleagues, financial reporters, but not the one face that had unexpectedly haunted her thoughts since seeing his name on the guest list. "Is everyone from the VIP list accounted for?" she asked casually. "Almost everyone. A few stragglers, including—" her assistant checked the tablet. "Mr. Harrington from the Business Association. His office confirmed he's attending." Sophia kept her expression neutral, though her heart quickened slightly. After 15 years of building her life and business without a second thought for Elliot Harrington, why should his potential presence affect her now? She smoothed her perfectly tailored navy suit and reminded herself of the truth. She was no longer the vulnerable young woman he had discarded. She was Sophia Abrantes, CEO of a billion-dollar company, mother to 2 extraordinary children, and today belonged to her. At 10:45, guests were seated in the grand ballroom. From backstage, Sophia could see the front row filled with financial journalists, cameras ready. Her executive team waited nearby, along with Lucas and Laura, who would join her on stage after the initial announcement. 2-minute warning, the event coordinator announced. Sophia took a deep breath, centering herself. This moment represented not just a business milestone, but the culmination of 15 years of relentless work, sacrifice, and determination. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice filled the ballroom, "please welcome the founder and CEO of Abrantes Aviation, Ms. Sophia Abrantes." Applause erupted as Sophia walked onto the stage, confidence in every step. The lights were bright enough that she couldn't make out individual faces in the audience, for which she was momentarily grateful. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady and clear. 15 years ago, I cleaned office buildings in Boston's financial district before dawn. Today, I stand before you as the founder of Abrantes Aviation, a company that has revolutionized executive travel between the Americas. As her eyes adjusted to the lights, Sophia scanned the audience, finding familiar faces, supporters, competitors, journalists, and then, in the back of the room, a face that sent a jolt of recognition through her body. Elliot Harrington sat rigidly in his chair, his expression a complex mixture of shock and something else, disbelief perhaps, or regret. Without missing a beat in her speech, Sophia continued, "Our journey began with a simple insight, that true connection between cultures requires more than transportation. It requires understanding, respect, and authenticity." For 40 minutes, Sophia detailed Abrantes Aviation's rise, its innovative approach to multilingual service, and its plans for global expansion. Throughout her presentation, she maintained perfect composure, though she was acutely aware of Elliot's gaze following her every move. "When barriers arose, we didn't change course. We built wings," she said, approaching the announcement that had drawn everyone to the conference. "Today, I'm proud to announce that Abrantes Aviation will open its next chapter as a publicly traded company, with an initial valuation of $2.1 billion. Murmurs rippled through the audience as financial journalists furiously typed notes. Sophia allowed herself a moment to savor the milestone before continuing. "This achievement belongs not just to me, but to everyone who believed in our vision, especially my children, who have been part of this journey from the beginning. I'd like to invite them to join me on stage, Lucas and Laura Abrantes." The twins walked onto the stage with poise that belied their 15 years. Lucas, tall and serious in his navy suit. Laura, confident and poised in her blazer with the pilot's pin. They flanked their mother, three figures united not by what they'd lost, but by what they'd built together. Lucas is already an award-winning engineer whose drone designs are revolutionizing our surveillance capabilities, Sophia said proudly. And Laura has become the youngest licensed pilot in Massachusetts, already logging more flight hours than many professionals twice her age. From his seat in the back, Elliot stared at the teenagers on stage, his heart pounding uncomfortably against his ribs. The boys' height, the girls' posture, and most strikingly, their eyes, the same piercing blue as his own, looking out from faces that somehow combined his features with Sophia's. There was no question. These were his children, the ones he had dismissed with a checkbook and cruel words 15 years ago. Lucas stepped to the microphone, his voice surprisingly deep and assured as he described the technological innovations Abrantes Aviation was implementing. Laura followed, detailing her experience as a young pilot and the company's commitment to training the next generation of aviators. As the formal presentation concluded and the networking reception began, Sophia was immediately surrounded by well-wishers and potential investors. The twins circulated separately, impressively mature as they engaged with business leaders and aviation experts. Elliot remained frozen in his seat long after most guests had moved to the reception area. The shock of seeing Sophia, not just successful but triumphant, had been overwhelming enough. But seeing the children, his children, poised and accomplished on that stage, had shaken him to his core. When he finally gathered himself enough to join the reception, Elliot moved through the crowd like a ghost, accepting mechanical congratulations on his role as association president, while his eyes continuously sought Sophia among the clusters of attendees. He found her near the champagne fountain, laughing genuinely at something said by the CEO of a major airline. She looked nothing like the frightened girl he remembered. Her posture was confident, her outfit expertly tailored, her entire being radiating success and self-assurance. Elliot waited until she was momentarily alone before approaching, his mouth suddenly dry. "Sophia, it's been a long time." She turned, her composure perfect, only the slightest tightening around her eyes betraying recognition. "Elliot, I didn't expect to see you interested in aviation. Your presentation was impressive, he managed, his voice slightly unsteady. You've built something extraordinary. Thank you, she replied coolly. I had to build, since destruction seemed to be the specialty of others. The barb landed precisely, but before Elliot could respond, a young voice interrupted them. Mom, Mr. Reynolds from United wants to discuss that partnership proposal. Lucas appeared at Sophia's elbow, followed closely by Laura. Up close, their resemblance to him was even more striking. His eyes, his jawline, elements of his features seamlessly blended with Sophia's. Lucas, Laura, Sophia said with clinical detachment, this is Elliot Harrington, an old acquaintance. The twins greeted him politely, without the slightest indication they knew who he truly was. Elliot felt simultaneously relieved and devastated by their ignorance. It's very nice to meet you both, he said, his voice thick with emotion he couldn't fully suppress. Your mother's accomplishments are remarkable. Laura tilted her head slightly, studying him with intelligent eyes that seemed to see too much. Thank you, Mr. Harrington. If you'll excuse us, we're needed for the partnership discussion. As they turned to leave, the announcement for dinner interrupted the moment. Sophia nodded a frigid farewell to Elliot, guiding her children toward the head table where they would be seated as guests of honor. Throughout the elegant dinner, Elliot couldn't tear his eyes from the family at the center table, the family that should have included him had he made different choices. While the CEO of the Aviation Association announced the official IPO valuation of Abrantes Aviation at $2.1 billion, Elliot barely registered the words, too consumed by the realization of what he had thrown away. When the time came for questions from the audience, Elliot found himself standing, impulsively raising his hand. The microphone was brought to him, and suddenly every eye in the room turned his way. Ms. Abrantes, your story of overcoming obstacles is inspiring, he said, his voice carrying across the silent room. Is there any particular challenge you consider most difficult in your journey? The ballroom fell silent. Sophia looked directly at him for the first time, a calculated smile touching her lips. The greatest obstacle, Mr. Harrington, was learning that some people who should support you are exactly those who will try to convince you of your limitations. When someone told me I was just a Brazilian seeking a green card, I transformed that rejection into fuel. Today, I employ 347 people, including 89 pilots, and our market value has just surpassed that of most traditional Boston real estate developers combined. The precision of her strike left Elliot speechless. Several executives glanced between him and Sophia, connecting dots they couldn't possibly fully understand. A murmur rippled through the room while Sophia continued, relentless. As for my children, they are living proof that we don't need people who don't value us. Lucas has just been accepted to MIT's Special Aerospace Engineering program, and Laura has been selected for the Air Force Academy's training program, all without a penny or a word of support from who should have been their father. The silence that followed was deafening. Elliot remained paralyzed, his face flushed with shame as all heads turned toward him. The twins, now comprehending what was happening, looked shocked between their mother and the stranger they had just met. While the deafening silence settled over the ballroom, no one could predict that the real confrontation between past and present was only beginning and would be far more personal than any billion-dollar business announcement. The silence that followed Sophia's public revelation felt eternal. The elegant ballroom, moments ago filled with celebratory energy, now crackled with tension. Elliot remained frozen in place, the microphone still clutched in his trembling hand as hundreds of eyes darted between him and the family at the center table. The conference moderator, sensing disaster, quickly approached. Thank you for that illuminating response, Ms. Abrantes. Let's move to our next segment. But the damage was done. The twins' expressions had transformed from professional composure to stunned disbelief. Laura was the first to move, pushing her chair back abruptly and walking toward the exit with rigid dignity. Lucas followed a moment later, his face a careful mask that didn't quite hide the storm beneath. Sophia watched them go, her momentary satisfaction at Elliot's public humiliation instantly replaced by concern for her children. She rose gracefully, nodded to the moderator, and followed her children, leaving the murmuring crowd and a devastated Elliot behind. She found them on the hotel's rooftop terrace, standing side by side at the railing. The Boston skyline sparkled against the darkening sky, oblivious to the family drama unfolding above the city. "That man is our father?" Laura's voice was tight, controlled, but Sophia could hear the undercurrent of pain. "Biologically, yes," Sophia answered, joining them at the railing. Lucas turned to face her, his blue eyes, Elliot's eyes, searching her face. "Why didn't you ever tell us who he was exactly? We knew someone had abandoned you, but not him, not someone we might actually meet." Sophia took a deep breath, the cool evening air filling her lungs. "I told you that your biological father didn't want to be part of our lives. The specific details seemed unnecessary." She touched Laura's shoulder gently. "I didn't want you growing up with anger or feeling rejected." Laura wiped away a tear that had escaped despite her efforts. All this time he was just… what? Living his life in the same city? Did he ever ask about us? "Never," Sophia said simply. "Not once in 15 years. "He's pathetic," Laura declared, her voice steadying as anger replaced hurt. "All that speech about our company being inspirational when really he just wanted… what? Recognition? After 15 years? Lucas leaned against the railing, analytical even in emotional crisis. The way he looked at us, like he was seeing ghosts. He didn't know we existed, did he? Not really. "I don't think he allowed himself to think about it," Sophia replied honestly. "People like Elliot Harrington are good at compartmentalizing uncomfortable truths." For several minutes, they stood together in silence, the family unit that had weathered every storm without him, processing this unexpected collision of past and present. "We should go back," Sophia finally said. "This is still our celebration. We've earned it." As they returned to the ballroom, heads turned and conversations hushed momentarily before resuming with forced casualness. Sophia guided her children back to their table with quiet dignity, refusing to let Elliot's presence diminish their achievement. Throughout dinner, Sophia noticed Elliot watching them from his table, his food untouched, his expression haunted. Once, when she caught his eye, he didn't look away but held her gaze with something like pleading. She turned her attention back to her children, dismissing him as effectively as he had once dismissed her. As the event concluded, Sophia, Lucas, and Laura were preparing to leave when a hotel staff member approached. "Ms. Abrantes, Mr. Harrington asks if he might speak with you privately. He's waiting in the beacon room down the hall." Sophia looked to her children, leaving the decision to them. After exchanging glances, they nodded almost imperceptibly. "Tell him we'll give him 5 minutes," Sophia instructed the staff member. The beacon room was a small conference space, elegantly appointed with leather chairs and a polished table. Elliot stood when they entered, his composed exterior betrayed by nervous hands that couldn't quite find their place. "Thank you for coming," he began, his voice hoarse. "I know I have no right to ask for your time." "You don't," Laura confirmed coolly, taking a seat without waiting for an invitation. Elliot swallowed hard, visibly thrown by the directness that reminded him so much of himself. I don't know where to begin." "Perhaps with an apology," Lucas suggested, his tone deceptively casual. 15 years overdue, but traditional etiquette suggests it's still the place to start. Sophia remained silent, allowing her children to navigate this encounter on their terms. She had protected them from this man for 15 years. Now they were old enough to face him with their own strength. "You're right," Elliot agreed, sinking into a chair. "I committed the greatest mistake of my life 15 years ago. Not a day passes without me thinking about what I did. When I saw you today, when I saw what could have been my children, We could have been your children, Lucas interrupted, his voice firm. That choice was made 15 years ago, when you wrote a check and walked out of the restaurant. The precision of the strike, Lucas referencing details he couldn't possibly know unless Sophia had shared them, made Elliot flinch. He looked at Sophia with new understanding. She had told them everything. I was young, selfish, terrified, Elliot continued, desperation creeping into his voice. I listened to my parents, to people who told me it would ruin my future. I convinced myself it was the right decision, but I've regretted it every day since. Yet you never looked for us, Laura pointed out, never checked to see if we even existed. Elliot had no answer for this, the most damning truth of all. Instead, he tried another approach. I know nothing can make up for lost time, but I'd like to be part of your lives now. Financially, I can contribute to your university education, help with the company. Sophia laughed then, a genuine sound of amusement that surprised everyone in the room. Elliot, she said, speaking directly to him for the first time, Lucas has a full scholarship to MIT. Laura has been accepted to the Air Force Academy. Our company has just been valued at over $2 billion. What exactly do you think you can offer that we haven't already achieved on our own? Her words hung in the air, a perfect encapsulation of 15 years condensed into one devastating question. Laura, composure recovered, added, Our mother taught us that our worth doesn't depend on validation from someone who chose not to be part of our lives. And your current net worth doesn't buy 15 years of absence, Lucas completed, with a coldness that echoed Elliot's own business demeanor. Defeat settled over Elliot's features. He looked suddenly older, the weight of his choices physically manifesting in the slump of his shoulders. I understand, he said quietly. I wouldn't want anything to do with me either, if I were in your position. He made one final attempt. Sophia, please. At least let me get to know them. I have 2 other children from my second marriage. They could meet their half-siblings. That decision isn't mine, Sophia replied calmly. Lucas and Laura are old enough to decide if they want any relationship with you. The twins exchanged glances, a lifetime of unspoken communication passing between them. Maybe someday, Laura finally said, her voice softer but no less resolved. But not today. Not when it feels more like an attempt to ease your conscience than a genuine desire to know us. Lucas nodded in agreement. We need time to process this. Tonight was supposed to be about celebrating our company's achievement, not confronting family history. As they stood to leave, Elliot remained seated, looking small in the large leather chair. I understand, he said again, though his expression suggested he didn't, not really. May I at least have a way to contact you? Directly? Sophia pulled a business card from her purse and placed it on the table. My office will always know how to reach us, she said formally. The choice to respond will be theirs. As they exited the room, returning to the now emptying ballroom, Sophia was immediately approached by a cluster of journalists eager for details about the IPO. Looking back, she saw Elliot emerge from the Beacon Room, only to be cornered by a reporter from the Boston Globe who appeared to be asking about the dramatic confrontation during the event. The following morning, Sophia woke to multiple news alerts on her phone. The business press had covered the Abrantes Aviation IPO announcement extensively, but several publications had also picked up on the personal drama that had unfolded. CEO abandoned while pregnant confronts ex-boyfriend during billion-dollar IPO announcement, read one headline. Another proclaimed, Revenge served sky high, abandoned mother's aviation empire, outvalues ex's family business. The Wall Street Journal's coverage was more subdued but equally pointed, featuring a side-by-side comparison. Sophia with the twins boarding the company helicopter after the event, contrasted with Elliot leaving the hotel alone, head bowed. Sophia showed the coverage to the twins over breakfast in their penthouse. Are you okay with this? She asked carefully. I never intended for our personal history to become public fodder. Lucas shrugged, surprisingly unbothered. It's just facts. He abandoned you. You built an empire without him. We're successful. What's there to be ashamed of? Laura, always more introspective, considered longer before answering. It's strange having strangers know such personal details, but like Lucas said, we're not the ones who should feel embarrassed by this story. 1 week later, Sophia piloted the family's private helicopter herself, with the twins as passengers, heading toward their summer home in Martha's Vineyard. The property, a sprawling beachfront estate with a private landing pad, had once belonged to Elliot's parents before the real estate crisis forced them to liquidate assets. When Sophia had purchased it 3 years ago, she hadn't known its history. The irony of owning the Harrington family's former vacation home had only become apparent when an elderly neighbor mentioned remembering young Elliot summering there as a child. "Mom," Laura called over the helicopter's communication system as they soared above the coastline. "Do you think we'll ever want to know him? Really know him, I mean?" Sophia considered the question carefully, watching the shoreline unfold beneath them. "That will always be your choice. What I can tell you is that carrying him as a weight never got us anywhere. Leaving him behind was what allowed us to fly." Below them, Boston diminished in the distance. Lucas pointed toward the Harrington building, once the tallest in the financial district, now overshadowed by newer, more impressive skyscrapers. Life has an interesting way of balancing things, Sophia reflected, increasing their altitude. I didn't build all this to prove something to him, but to prove something to ourselves. The helicopter climbed higher, leaving the city behind. At the control panel, Sophia adjusted their course, glancing at her children with a serene smile. In their minds, none of the three was thinking about Elliot Harrington anymore. They were too busy planning how much higher they could fly from here. The morning after the conference, the Boston skyline glittered under a perfect blue sky that matched the Abrantes Aviation logo. The tension from the previous night's confrontation lingered in the air of the penthouse as Sophia prepared breakfast, the familiar ritual providing comfort amid emotional turbulence. "The Globe called again," Laura announced, scrolling through her phone. "They want exclusive interviews with all of us about the dramatic reunion." She made air quotes with her fingers, her expression caught between amusement and annoyance. Sophia placed a plate of scrambled eggs in front of her daughter. "And what did Monica tell them?" she asked, referring to the company's public relations director. "The usual. Ms. Abrantes is focused on the company's public offering and has no further comment on personal matters." Lucas entered the kitchen, his hair still damp from the shower, a tablet in hand. "Have you seen this?" He placed the device on the counter, displaying the Boston Business Journal's front page. The headline read, "Abandoned Immigrants' Revenge. Abrantes Aviation Soars while Harrington Plummets." Sophia sighed, setting down the coffee pot. "They're turning our life into a soap opera." "It's a good story," Lucas shrugged, helping himself to toast. "Single mother abandoned by wealthy boyfriend builds billion-dollar company that outperforms his. You can't make that up." "I didn't build this company for revenge," Sophia said firmly, joining her children at the breakfast bar. "I built it because I saw an opportunity that others missed, and because I needed to create a future for us." Laura studied her mother's face. "But you must feel something, knowing he's watching your success after what he did." Sophia considered the question carefully. "Satisfaction, perhaps. Not because he's struggling, but because we succeeded despite his certainty that we couldn't." The twins exchanged glances, that silent communication they'd perfected since infancy. Lucas spoke first, his tone casual but his question anything but. "Will you tell us the whole story now? Not just the sanitized version?" Sophia looked between their faces, realizing they were no longer children to be protected from harsh truths. They were young adults who deserved the complete picture of their origins. "After breakfast," she agreed. "It's time you knew everything." Later, in the living room overlooking the harbor, Sophia told them the unvarnished truth about meeting Elliot, falling in love, believing his promises that social differences were just details. She described the restaurant where he'd abandoned her, the exact words he'd used. "You were always a temporary diversion, never a permanent plan." She explained the humiliation of being thrown out of her apartment, blocked from contacting him, and threatened with a restraining order when she'd tried to find him at his office. The twins listened without interruption, their expressions shifting between shock, anger, and finally, a somber understanding. "When I learned I was carrying twins," Sophia continued, "something changed in me. I stopped seeing myself as a victim and started seeing myself as your protector, your champion." She smiled, the memory still vivid. "I tore up his check and promised myself that we would succeed without his money, without his name, without anything he could give us." "You never told us about the check," Laura said quietly. $50,000, Sophia confirmed. The price he put on erasing his responsibility. At the time, it seemed like an enormous sum to someone in my position, enough to solve all my immediate problems, but it came with the expectation that I would disappear. Lucas's jaw tightened, his resemblance to Elliot momentarily striking. "And now we're worth billions." "Now we've built something valuable," Sophia corrected gently. "Worth isn't just measured in dollars." The conversation was interrupted by Sophia's phone. It was Monica, the PR director. "I'm sorry to disturb your morning, Sophia, but there's a situation developing. Mr. Harrington gave an interview to the Financial Times. It's problematic." 20 minutes later, Sophia was in her home office, the twins hovering behind her chair as she read the digital article. Elliot's interview was ostensibly about the challenges facing traditional real estate developers, but the journalist had clearly seized on the personal drama from the conference. Mr. Harrington acknowledged his profound regret over past personal decisions, the article read. When asked about his relationship with Sofia Abrantes and the revelation that he had abandoned her while pregnant with twins, Harrington became emotional. "I've made many mistakes in business, but none compare to the personal failure of not recognizing what I was giving up 15 years ago," he stated. "I can only hope there might be some path to redemption, some way to know the children I've only just discovered." Laura scoffed. "Redemption? He's making himself the victim in this story." "It's a calculated move," Lucas observed. "He's using our family drama to humanize himself while his company struggles. Classic PR strategy." Sophia closed the browser window, a decision forming in her mind. "We're not playing this game. We have an IPO to focus on, and you both have your futures to prepare for. Lucas, you have that MIT interview next week. Laura, your Air Force Academy application needs finalizing." "But what if he keeps pushing?" Laura asked. "What if he shows up at our door?" "Then we handle it with dignity," Sophia said firmly. "We don't need tabloid drama, and we don't need his sudden interest in our lives. We've managed perfectly well without him for 15 years. The following week brought the aftermath Sophia had predicted. Financial news covered the Abrantes Aviation IPO preparation extensively, but lifestyle publications and social media buzzed with the personal drama. Photographers lurked near their building, hoping to capture the family entering or leaving. Sophia hired additional security for the twins, ensuring they could attend their activities without harassment. The situation came to a head when Elliot sent a formal letter to their home address, an address he shouldn't have had access to. Inside was a handwritten note requesting a meeting with Lucas and Laura to begin getting to know each other without pressure or expectations. The twins read the letter together in Lucas's bedroom, their reactions characteristically different. Laura was indignant, pacing the room as she dissected every phrase for manipulation. Lucas sat quietly on his bed, analytical as always, considering implications and motivations. "He says he respects our boundaries, but then completely violates them by somehow getting our home address," Laura fumed. "And this line about no expectations, as if he could possibly know what we want or need." "He mentions his other children," Lucas noted. Apparently, we have half-siblings, a brother and sister, ages 7 and 4. This detail gave them both pause. The idea of siblings, even half-siblings, was something neither had considered in the abstract drama of discovering their biological father. When they brought the letter to Sophia, she maintained her calm exterior, though inwardly she seethed at Elliot's presumption. "This is your decision," she told them. "If you want to meet him, I won't stand in your way. If you don't, I'll ensure he respects that choice." After 2 days of deliberation, the twins reached their decision. They would meet Elliot, but on their terms, at Sophia's office, with her present, for a strictly limited time. No press, no photographs, no expectations of an ongoing relationship. The meeting was set for Friday afternoon. Sophia arranged for the conference room to be prepared, instructing her staff to treat it as any other business meeting. Whatever emotional currents might run beneath the surface, she was determined to maintain the professionalism that had defined her rise. Elliot arrived precisely on time, dressed in an expensive suit that nevertheless couldn't disguise how much he had aged in the 15 years since Sophia had last seen him up close. His hair had receded significantly, and lines of stress carved his once handsome face. He carried a small shopping bag, which he placed carefully on the conference table. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," he began, his voice steady though his hands betrayed his nervousness, fidgeting with his watch. "I know this is unusual for everyone." Lucas and Laura sat side by side across from him, their postures identical, straight-backed, hands folded on the table, expressions neutral. Sophia sat at the head of the table, a physical reminder of her position in this family dynamic. "We have questions," Lucas stated simply, "starting with how you found our home address." Elliot had the grace to look embarrassed. "I hired a private investigator. It was inappropriate, I realize that now. I was desperate to reach out." "Desperation doesn't justify invasion of privacy," Laura pointed out. "You could have contacted us through Mom's office, as she suggested." "You're right," Elliot conceded. "I've spent so many years taking shortcuts in business that I've developed bad habits. I apologize." The conversation proceeded cautiously, with the twins asking direct questions about Elliot's life, his other children, his version of what had happened 15 years ago. His answers seemed genuine, if sometimes painful to hear. He admitted to believing the worst of Sophia, to convincing himself the pregnancy was a trap, to intentionally cutting off all contact to protect himself from what he'd seen as a threat to his future. "I was wrong," he said simply, "catastrophically, unforgivably wrong. I can't change the past, but I hoped we might find some way forward." "Why now?" Lucas asked. "If you regretted your decision so deeply, why wait 15 years? Our company has been in the news before." Elliot's answer was revealing in its honesty. "I didn't allow myself to think about it. I put it in a box labeled dealt with and convinced myself Sophia had probably returned to Brazil. It was easier than facing what I'd done." He paused. "Seeing you both on that stage, seeing my eyes looking back at me from your faces, I couldn't hide from the truth anymore." As the meeting neared its scheduled end, Elliot gestured to the shopping bag. "I brought something. Not gifts exactly, but information, if you want it." He withdrew 2 medical folders. "Complete family medical history for both sides of my family. Regardless of what happens between us, you should have this information." The gesture, practical rather than sentimental, seemed to resonate with the twins more than any emotional appeal could have. "Thank you," Laura said, her first words of genuine appreciation. That was thoughtful. As they prepared to leave, Elliot made one final request. "May I reach out again? Perhaps in a few weeks?" The twins exchanged their silent communication before Lucas answered. "We need time to process all this. If we decide we're open to further contact, we'll let you know." 1 week later, Sophia piloted the company helicopter herself, taking the twins for their traditional Sunday flight. As they soared over Boston, The city spread beneath them like a miniature model of possibilities. Laura broke the comfortable silence. "Mom, do you think we'll ever have a real relationship with him? With Elliot?" Sophia considered the question, banking the helicopter gently toward the coastline. "That's for you to decide. There's no right answer." "He seems genuinely remorseful," Lucas observed, his eyes on the instruments, always the engineer. "But regret isn't the same as change." "Exactly," Sophia agreed. "People can feel sorry without being different. Watch his actions, not his words." Below them, Boston receded as they flew toward the open water. The Harrington building was barely visible now, just one unremarkable structure in a forest of more impressive towers. Once, that building had represented everything beyond Sophia's reach. Now it was merely a landmark they passed on their way to greater heights. The helicopter ascended further, leaving the city for the freedom of the open sky. On the control panel, Sophia adjusted their course, glancing at her children with quiet contentment. In their minds, none of the three was thinking about Elliot Harrington anymore. They were too busy planning how much higher they could fly from here. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.